I am your Manhunt.
Hello, fellow netizens, and welcome to Scandalous Games, the show where we take a closer look at video game-related controversies. I'm Kevin Impellizeri, and I do the research and share a story of a video game-related controversy to my friends.
My name's Phil, and you might as well consider me a video game newbie.
I'm Andy Hunter, a longtime fan of all things Nintendo.
I'm Kate. I've written software for over a decade, but not the fun kind.
And I have some hopefully pleasant news for both all of us here and those listening. This month, I absolutely promise that we will not be doing the self-proclaimed killologist Dave Grossman. We'll actually be taking 2 months off because we just did a whole first half of our 6-month series on the killologist. But we're going to take a break from him. It's October while we're recording this. Let's do something fun, something spooky, something that's going to get you ready for the holiday season, kind of go to something that's a little bit more close to our roots. And we're going to talk about one specific game and the controversies surrounding it. And that game this month is Manhunt. Has anyone heard of Manhunt, and what do you know about it?
I was never involved in a manhunt, and you can't prove anything.
That guy shot himself. I've not played this game. I have read a bit about this game. It's made by Rockstar, I think, right? It shares a universe with GTA.
Yeah, that's correct.
The sequel was for the Wii, and that was a little frightening for some folks because the whole business of, use motion controls to kill people. That's about all I know.
I've heard the name Manhunt. It's not an FMV game, is it?
No, it's not an FMV game.
Okay. All right, then I know nothing of Manhunt.
If you were to make a game called Manhunt, what do you think it would be about?
Puppies.
So I'm just guessing based on the title, but if I were to create a video game called Manhunt, it would be about me and, say, 5 of my friends going into the woods, say, the New Jersey Pine Barrens, and then me and 4 of my friends reemerging. Or hypothetically me. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't come back. Who knows?
We never speak of it again.
That's fine. You just played the most dangerous game. That's all. Yeah, I would probably bet, if I were to make a game called Manhunt, I would make it something along the lines of somehow you're controlling a police or FBI task force and you're hunting a fugitive. That's what comes to mind when I think of a manhunt.
Yeah, I think more like if this was a game that I was designing, that just the term manhunt puts more into mind that law enforcement trying to track down a notorious criminal.
I was thinking something a little more outside the box. Imagine if there was a game called Manhunt that was a dating sim. We have 5 eligible bachelors. Someone looking for a date.
Online dating is scary enough as it is. I don't know what you're doing here.
But instead of giving somebody a rose to kick them off, you take your sniper rifle, and then when they're leaving the date,
if there can be a dating sim game where you date literal birds, then yeah, Manhunt I think could be a dating sim. Look up Hatoful Boyfriend. It's wild. I think someone else was jumping in to say something, and then I had to go off of my nonsense.
Oh, I was going to come in with a joke, but thinking about it, I don't think it's very good, so we should probably just move on.
Since when has a joke not being good ever stopped any of us, though?
Since when have any of us ever told a joke that wasn't good?
Yeah, but this time I know it's not good.
I was going to say the opposite for me. When have I actually told a decent joke on this show?
Well, I mean, you're just giving us room to shine.
All right, so Manhunt is a third-person, stealth-based survival horror game developed by Rockstar North and published by Rockstar Games, a subsidiary of Take-Two Interactive. It first released in 2003 for the PlayStation 2, followed by releases for the PC and original Xbox in 2004. The game puts the player in the role of James Earl Cash, a death row inmate on the night of his execution.
Sorry, that name. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, they're real creative at Rockstar. Yeah, James Earl Cash, a death row inmate on the night of his execution, where instead of dying by lethal injection, he wakes up to an empty death chamber. Somehow escaping the needle, Cash finds a headset with a mysterious figure on the other end who has arranged for his escape, whereupon he's brought to the dilapidated Rust Belt town of Carcer City, the personal playground of the mysterious figure on the other end of the headset, Mr. Lionel Starkweather. However, he fancies himself the director, and he's cast Cash in the starring role of his new picture. What's Cash's motivation? survival. Cash must navigate grimy urban locales from industrial parks and junkyards to abandoned malls and zoos, avoiding capture from a succession of themed gangs determined to do him in. These include the white supremacist Skins, the military-themed War Dogs, and the happy-face masked Smileys. To survive, Cash must kill or be killed using a variety of weapons, including baseball bats, garrote wire, nail guns, and shards of broken glass to dispatch his would-be dispatchers. However, there's more to this night of carnage, as the director has cameras set at every angle to capture the brutality, and he's relying on Cash to get creative in his executions so he can get those all-important money shots. All the while, Cash struggles to stay alive and uncover the secrets of the director's plans. Have I lost anybody so far?
That's pretty straightforward.
Question, what year was this game created or came out?
It came out into the end of 2003.
Okay, I'm just trying to put myself in the context.
Yeah, it originally released in November of 2003.
Okay, so not... Okay.
Like, who are we offending today, sort of thing?
Well, we could play bingo with who are we offending today.
Yeah.
All right.
I was just thinking of it as like back in 2003, that's when Rockstar was still experimenting with the novel idea of releasing a game every few years. And also like nowadays they're not known for survival horror. They're known for just big sandbox stuff.
This is like an early Sam Raimi movie in comparison to what he does nowadays.
Here's the back of the box description for Manhunt, and this comes courtesy of the box for the PS2 version. They just killed Cash. Now they want to kill him again. You awake to the sound of your own panicked breath. You must run, hide, and fight to survive. And ain't that a phrase that hits differently in 2023 than it does in 2003? If you can stay alive long enough, you may find out who did this to you. Manhunt. This is a brutal blood sport. America is full of run-down, broken Rust Belt towns where nobody cares and anything goes. In Carcer City, nothing matters anymore and all that's left are cheap thrills. The ultimate rush is the power to grant life and take it away for sport. This time, James Earl Cash, you were the sport. They gave you your life back. Now they're going to hunt you down. So that's our description of Manhunt. And as you chime in your thoughts on that, I'm going to bring up some gameplay footage so you can get a sense of what we're talking about here. Yeah, Phil.
His name is James Earl Cash?
Yeah.
Like James Earl Ray, but just with the last name Cash?
Johnny Cash, I assume.
Oh, it's Johnny Cash, or I thought they were trying to evoke the guy who assassinated Kennedy. Oh, wait, no.
Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald.
That was James Earl Ray who assassinated Martin Luther King.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Super. All right,
I think they were. I took it that way too, Phil. Like it's like in Child's Play, Charles Lee Ray, the character, he's a mashup of Charles Manson, Henry Lee Lucas, and James Earl Ray. At least they put some thought into that. This feels like they just, James Earl Ray, and then somebody put a record on while they were writing this, and just.
Oh yeah, thanks, Kate. I'm wondering if we're supposed to take that context into the. I'm sure the video is going to clear up a lot.
Not really. Spoiler alert, not really.
I was actually assuming just that he was named James Earl Ray because he just had the world's most amazing deep bass voice. I am your Manhunt.
I hear the murders coming. They're rolling round the bend. All right, so I brought up we'll watch about 5 minutes or so. This is the opening scenes of Manhunt. So this is like the tutorial levels, the setup.
You're probably suffering from shock, and I'm here to help. Pick up the ears. Put it on. Go on. That's better. Now only you can hear me. And that's the way you're gonna want it, because I'm your only way out of here. Hey, easy. Look, you've had an unexpected reprieve. Do exactly as I say, and I promise this will be over before the night is out. These streets are being patrolled by gangs. They're scum, just like you. And they're here to hunt you down and cut you up.
Did the gangs all just get off the bus?
But other than that, you're on your own. It's up to you. Okay, are you ready? Camera, action.
And so we see Cash going down a dilapidated alleyway. He picks up a plastic bag.
Nice, not jump.
And he sneaks up on a guy behind him. holding up the plastic bag. There's a graffiti next to him that says, "Kill this dumb fuck." And now he's going to town on him with that plastic bag.
Oh yeah, so I'm guessing that was probably like an object interaction thing of just like, if you have the right tool, you just enter this cut scene and it shows him using the tool to kill the guy.
Yeah, is this like QuickTime events for the actual murders, Kevin?
The scenes of the executions happening are just cutscenes. Everything's setting up to it, the player does.
I left my smokes in the pickup.
So we sneak up on another guy here. And you can see Cash behind him holding the bag. And now he grabs his face with that bag and punches his face in a bunch. And snaps his neck for good measure. There we go.
Getting a real taste for this.
And so that is a little bit of Manhunt. Any thoughts about what we've seen?
It looks like, Rockstar has long had a practice, I guess, of making the protagonist of their game some sort of outlaw or criminal or murderer. So I just noticed like, oh, all right, I guess yet another protagonist I would have a hard time rooting for, except for the fact that they're the one who moves when I wiggle my joystick. So
I thought the visuals were pretty good, especially given like the 2003. Like, there's some good technological heft behind the game, it seems like. Also, are we to believe that the entire game is basically through a camera? I mean, you know what I mean. I know we're watching, but like, it looks like, what's his name? The overseer, the director, the Lionel Straightfeathers or whatever his name is.
Yeah, the director.
Oh no,
the director. Lionel
Thank you.
Starkweather, they call him the director.
Okay, whatever. That guy. It seems like he's watching the whole thing through a camera, I guess, because there were a few parts where there was like a recording symbol. Is that the whole game? Like,
Yeah,
basically, you're Lionel. You're watching this from Lionel's point of view, even though you're interacting as James Earl Cash.
So you're Cash playing through it, and what it does is the whole game has kind of a like grainy VHS kind of aesthetic to it. The game will cut away to these sort of grainier, there's supposed to be closed circuit camera scenes when you do an execution, emphasizing the idea that the director is filming all of this carnage. So everything that's happening here is being filmed on kind of sort of these low grade, low quality VHS scene. On its surface, Manhunt might just be that ever-elusive murder simulator that the likes of Dave Grossman and Jack Thompson have been warning us about. However, the story of Manhunt is a fascinating glimpse at one of the most important game companies of the industry at the time it came out, and what that meant for some people concerned about video games' potential impact on the moral fabric of society. So today, we're going to talk about Manhunt. We'll discuss its development, its cultural inspirations, its reception, and the ways people already anxious about what they thought video games were doing to young people found a lot in Manhunt to be anxious about. And along the way, we'll encounter some familiar faces who had some strong opinions on video games. So with that out of the way, here we go. As far back as Tommy Vercetti could remember, he always wanted to be a gangster. I think I have that right, although I might have mixed them up with somebody else. In 1986, after serving a 15-year prison sentence in Liberty City, his connections in the Forelli crime family sent him to the neon-fueled beach town of Vice City to help cultivate the local drug trade. Tommy turned his fresh start in a new city into a personal empire to rival any 1980s guy, full of mansions, cocaine, sports cars, and driving off ramps for insane stunt bonuses. From the moment Rockstar first announced development on its follow-up to Grand Theft Auto 3 at the 2002 Electronic Entertainment Expo, the company promised Grand Theft Auto Vice City would surpass its predecessor in every way. As Rockstar Games head Sam Houser declared at E3 that year, quote, "The success of Grand Theft Auto 3 has made us very proud, but it's also motivated us enormously. The work currently being done by our development and production teams in Edinburgh and New York is going to surpass the efforts of last year as we set our sights on making an even more revolutionary gaming experience. This will be reflected in the size of the game, the scope of the gameplay, the extent of the player's freedom, the quality of production value, and the all-important sense of style," end quote. And by all measures, Vice City delivered. It boasted a more robust story with the series' first fully voiced protagonist, a cast of recognizable actors, including Ray Liotta as Tommy Vercetti, and performances from the likes of Luis Guzman, Burt Reynolds, Dennis Hopper, and Danny Trejo.
They got Henry Hill for this? I didn't know that.
Which one was that?
Ray Liotta. He was Henry Hill in Goodfellas.
Yeah.
That's just kind of
Yeah, that was kind of a big deal. You know, they love doing these mafia-themed crime dramas. You know, Grand Theft Auto 3 was very much about, like, mafia, like Scarface and Godfather inspired. And so, yeah, they got Ray Liotta, the good fella himself, to play the main character. On top of that, it had a lineup of radio stations chock full of licensed period-accurate music, new vehicles, including boats and aircraft, and a ton of new things to do, wrapped in a package that was a love letter to the over-the-top neon excesses of the 1980s. The game was a massive critical and commercial success, attracting almost universal praise from reviewers and gamers alike. Despite its October the 29th, 2002 release, it was the best-selling game of that month, on its way to becoming the best-selling game of the year, selling over 5.7 million units in 2002 alone. It is also the fourth best-selling game on the PlayStation 2 of all time, selling roughly 10.5 million copies on just the PS2. So by any metrics, this game was a massive hit. And speaking as a college kid when it came out, GTA Vice City was a sensation. And going to my dorm, you couldn't escape the sounds of gunfire, police sirens, and Judas Priest, you got another thing coming blaring through the hallways.
that had nothing to do with the game.
When Vice City came out, there were actually a couple kids on my floor who played it all the time. They kept the volume on it full blast. And I remember I was in like a tower type place. It was an 8-story residence hall. And we were on like the 5th floor. And I remember I could walk up to the main entrance of this place and you could hear the sounds of police sirens and gunfire from the ground level. It was ridiculous how loud they had this game. That means I had a lot of fun playing it. I remember going over a friend of the show, Ryan Weaver's house, and we would all take turns, you know, causing as much mayhem as we could before the police finally got us. And I had a lot of good fun playing that. I'd love to know, does anybody else have any experience playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City?
I'm afraid I've never grand thefted an auto in Vice City or anywhere else.
So I don't think I've played Vice City for more than an hour, but Philadelphia is really starting to feel like that video game nowadays.
I've never played Vice City. I played a little bit of GTA 3, never for more than maybe an hour at a stretch.
Yeah, when this came out, I was a GameCube kid. So I only played it when I went over friends' houses. And of the Grand Theft Auto trilogy from that time, 3, Vice City, and San Andreas is the one I've actually played the least. That being said, I consumed a lot of the media around it. Like, it was a big deal when the soundtrack came out and they actually released CDs of each of the radio stations with the selection of songs from it. And I had the V-Rock one, which was the, you know, hair metal station. And I listened to that CD a lot. It's got a really awesome rock soundtrack. They really did a good job licensing music for this, and it fits the style so much. The little I played with it, I had a lot of fun with it. I can see what people enjoy about it. At the height of their power, and in the same month as they reported record profits, thanks in no small part to Rockstar's epic 1980s crime drama, on May the 14th, 2003, Take-Two and Rockstar issued a press release announcing Rockstar North was working on a brand new project called Manhunt, promising a fall 2003 release exclusively for the PS2. The press release promised an experience in Manhunt on par with what gamers had come to expect from the makers of the Grand Theft Auto series, explaining, quote, Manhunt will continue in the tradition of world-class gameplay, incredible production values, and sardonic sense of humor that has become synonymous with Rockstar North, end quote. While the announcement was scant on details, Rockstar and Take-Two revealed Manhunt would be an intense horror game, writing, quote, Manhunt explores the depths of human depravity in a vicious, sadistic tale of urban horror, end quote. Rockstar launched an equally cryptic official website for Manhunt later that month. And if you were to check through the Wayback Machine captures of the page today, of the site from the time, you'll just see a blank page. However, doing a little research, according to a May the 28th, 2003 report from GameSpot, visitors to the website would see a pop-up window that would direct them to the homepage of Valiant Video Enterprises, a fictional production company that promised, quote, fetish hardcore and brutality, videos made to order, end quote, and encourage people to send their inquiries to Mr. Nasty at valiant-ent.tv.
Sounds like they were like not quite in like augmented reality kind of thing, but definitely the type of advertising where they don't, it's all like in-universe style advertising. What
happened if you emailed that email address?
I don't know. I can't imagine it works anymore.
But we could find out.
So yeah, that was people's initial impressions of Manhunt was this website. I love the tie-in that you brought up, Andy. It's almost like an ARG kind of thing. It's like, what are we talking about here? What is Manhunt? I bet it's about some game called Manhunt.
That we hunt something, maybe man.
Reportedly, by the time of its announcement, Manhunt had been in development for about 3 years, from a team mostly separate from the group responsible for the GTA series. That being said, the team who created it had a lot of past experience with previous Rockstar North games. They had a lot of veterans on this team. Perusing the game's credits reveals several people in lead positions on Manhunt had worked on GTA 3 and or Vice City, as well as some other notable properties for the company formerly known as DMA Design. For example, Manhunt's development director was Leslie Benzies, who had been the lead programmer for the 1998 cult N64 game Space Station Silicon Valley. Lead programmer John White had been the project lead on Body Harvest, an N64 game released in 1998 that I really want to like, have started half a dozen times, and have never finished the first level.
Question. So when they came up with the concept for this game and started to work on it, had they experienced the success of Vice City yet?
As far as I can tell, that probably they start developing this on the success of the original Grand Theft Auto games. I would say Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2. So 3 comes out in 2001. So if we're to assume this, that the basis that they were working on it for 3 years on the announcement comes from a write-up on the game from IGN from August the 22nd, 2003. This is a couple months before the game comes out. So let's say that they were probably started working on this around 2000. So 2000, 2001. So that would have been GTA 2 had been out at that point, and they would have been working on GTA 3 because GTA 3 came out in 2001. So that's roughly in that time period where they're making this. And so it's possible the announcement at this point is like, we're at the height of our power. Let's try to branch out into something different. That's what my guess would be in terms of the timeline.
Okay. So they built this kind of off of the success of some of the initial games. Then it's getting close to being completed. Vice City comes out. That's a huge success. And then this is poised to be the next thing they release after Vice City.
Yeah, they've set this up as the follow-up to Vice City, because Vice City comes out in October of 2002, and then they announce Manhunt in May of 2003. So this is the first title that they're making after Vice City, or at least the first title they're putting out after Vice City. And they're also using this as kind of, it seems like they're using this as kind of a springboard to like, we've made massive success in the open world genre. We're going to try to branch out into a whole new genre. And so survival horror was not really something that Rockstar was known for. Like I said, at this point, Rockstar North / DMA Design had been best known for, GTA 3 comes out in 2001, Vice City comes out in 2002, the previous Grand Theft Auto games, which were over-the-top / isometric type games. And then there were these other kind of games, like they made Lemmings, they made Space Station Silicon Valley, they made Body Harvest. And so Body Harvest is an open world game. And so there are these kinds of games that they had experimented with throughout the course of the 1990s. And so this is kind of like an extension of more experimentation by Rockstar North. And I love thinking of the contrast of that today, when they haven't made a new game since Grand Theft Auto 5, and what Grand Theft Auto came with 2013. Or am I thinking Red Dead 2? Red Dead 2 came out after that. But they don't make a lot of games anymore.
Why would you have to make a new game when GTA Online just gives you $1 million a day, or however much it is they make off of that?
Yeah. Details were scant over the summer, and Rockstar showed nothing of Manhunt at that year's E3. It wasn't until late summer and early fall 2003 that the company offered their first look at the game through a series of previews covered by gaming press outlets like GameSpot and IGN. It was through these reports that the gaming public first learned that Manhunt was a third-person stealth horror game. According to company reps, its story, presentation, and themes drew inspiration from a variety of sources, including the films The Running Man, Surviving the Game, Marathon Man, Romper Stomper, and Jacob's Ladder, as well as the 1924 Richard Connell short story, The Most Dangerous Game. The creators also cited reality TV shows as an influence behind their concept of a world where every brutal second of human depravity is caught on camera. So possibly the Survivor, Fear Factor, and Big Brother craze in American entertainment at the time taken to its logical conclusion. And speaking of catching some weird shit on film, there was another clear inspiration behind Manhunt, one few observers failed to comment on: snuff films. Now, is anyone here familiar with a snuff film?
Phil, that hand went up real fast.
A snuff film is anything that inspired Quentin Tarantino?
A snuff film, if I recall, is the definition is something along the lines of a person being murdered on film, and it's real, on purpose, etc. And to my knowledge, no actual snuff films exist. Or I should say, no actual snuff films have been proven to exist.
That's a great definition. If I can jump off that, a snuff film is a a type of professionally developed film where real people are brutally killed on camera and the tapes of the murder are sold, copied, and shared through like an underground network of wealthy or depraved sickos. So it's not just that it's someone being brutally killed on film, it's that act is designed as a commercial good that is packaged and sold to people. So this is what allegedly a snuff film is. And I say allegedly pretty heavily because, as Kate pointed out, there is no documented evidence of a snuff film ever existing. So conceptually, the earliest iterations of a snuff film in popular culture being mentioned was in the early 1970s. It was initially brought up by a Christian conservative group who warned that media is becoming so depraved that we're even filming people while they're murdered and selling the tapes. There's a really great podcast called American Hysteria, which talks a lot about different types of moral panics. And they did 2 episodes on snuff films, and it's really, really fascinating because they talked about their history, instances where people thought they found a snuff film but didn't actually find a snuff film, but also the ways that various groups, from feminists to anti-pornography crusaders to religious conservatives to shady filmmakers, use the idea of the existence of a snuff film to serve their pet agendas, trick people into giving them money, or both. So, for example, in the 1970s, when the idea came around of a snuff film, there's a bunch of really shady film producers who basically repurposed a movie that they were already making and just renamed it. They called it Snuff and basically tried to frame it as this real murder that was filmed. And it was, if you watch it, it was obviously staged. Like, it was all completely fake. It was just marketing as a snuff film. And they even paid people to protest it as a marketing campaign. Think about what we talked about with Running with Scissors and Postal, and going back to our Postal episodes, that like a lot of the controversy around it was really drummed up by the people who made it so they get a bunch of attention and therefore sales. That's kind of what happened with snuff films in the 70s, specifically marketed to trigger moral conservatives into protesting it so the press would give them a whole bunch of coverage. But there has been no documented evidence of a snuff film. And again, specifically meaning a film that is deliberately produced with a murderer that is then packaged and distributed for sale ever existing. There's no evidence that ever happened. It's basically an urban myth. But when they're making Manhunt, they're trying to borrow from that aesthetic and that idea of depraved acts being caught on film. So that's where Manhunt's inspirations are in terms of a creative medium. As for Manhunt as a game, it borrowed elements that were familiar features from other stealth games, such as using shadows for cover and utilizing sound as a core gameplay element. However, what separated Manhunt from the likes of Tenchu, Thief, and Metal Gear Solid was what the game allowed players to do when they got the drop on enemies. Where other stealth games may have you silently take down opponents or even completely avoid them, Manhunt wanted players to get as close, personal, and violent as possible. In keeping with the snuff film motif, the director, as any self-respecting producer of violent sleaze, wants the action as brutal as possible and constantly encourages Cash through his adventure to up the murderous ante. So when players sneak up, and we saw this a bit in the gameplay footage that we saw, when players sneak up on an unsuspecting enemy, Cash raises whatever weapon he's currently holding, prompting players to press a button to trigger an execution. Each weapon has 3 color-coded levels of executions. Those are white, yellow, and red. The longer the player holds the button before performing the kill, the more brutal the finisher. For example, dispatching a stalker with a baseball bat could range from a couple quick bonks to the head at the lowest level, to Cash wrestling a dude to the ground and then smashing their head to bits at the highest level. So I'm going to give you some examples of some of the executions you could see in Manhunt. I won't show all of them, but I'll give you some examples here.
Okay, are you ready? Camera, action.
So here's the plastic bag. This is at the lowest level. He just smothers the person with the plastic bag. They fall and die. The second level, he roughs him up a little bit while he's smothered with the plastic bag. And the very highest level, where he smothers him with the plastic bag, pounds his face in, and then snaps his neck. So here's a knife.
By the way, I also have to say that those plastic bags, if I got them from the store, I'd be very disappointed, because as he's punching somebody whose head is totally covered with a plastic bag, you're seeing blood still splatter. Like, that's got to be a weak plastic bag.
I need to know the blood capacity of these bags. So some of the others we're seeing is, for example, a blackjack or a baseball bat, where at lower levels you're just kind of bonking people, and by the end you're just like bashing their face in and knocking their heads off and stuff. Here's a crowbar, and he jams the back of the crowbar in the back of the person's head. Here's the baseball bat bonking. The highest level of baseball bat, he strangles a person to the ground, and once he gets him on the ground, sets him up like a baseball tee, and just smashes their head off. And of course, everyone's favorite garrote wire. First level, he just chokes the person until they get down. Second level, chokes him a little longer, spins him around, just watches, looks him in the eyes, the light falls from his eyes. And at the highest level we see here, knocks the person to the ground while strangling them, and then uses the garrote to saw their head off. So that's a little bit of a sampling of what people could experience while playing Manhunt.
And do the higher level executions, do they give you more points, or like, is there some degree of in-game actual benefit to doing that beyond just the character encouraging you to do so?
Style points, yeah.
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, there basically is. So the way the game is set up is it's divided into levels. And at the end of every level, you're given a rating. And so the rating is based on how brutal you go with those executions. So if you go for the high level executions and how quickly you finish the level. And it goes on a star rating. So there are two difficulty levels in Manhunt, Fetish and Hardcore. Fetish is the main difficulty. Hardcore is your harder difficulty. And on Fetish mode, you can get as many as 4 stars out of 5. And at the higher level, you can get 5 stars out of 5. And getting the highest star ratings unlocks different things in the game. So like production art, cheat codes, alternate costumes for cash, alternate modes. So there is an incentive to go for higher violence. I will also point out that there are certain levels where, depending on the objective, because some levels have different objectives to get through, that in some of them you can just completely avoid people and just get past them. And in other ones, you have to kill a certain amount of people, or you have to eliminate certain people. So it depends on the stage, but yeah, there is an incentive to doing this. And also, because this is a stealth-based game, there's a certain level of risk-reward to the executions, because like, say you're in an area where there are like 3 or 4 stalkers looking for you, you might be incentivized in that case to do a quick execution just to avoid detection, so you can go back into the shadows and hide, versus going for high-level executions. So there's both an incentive and a risk-reward system within the game. And this is really what separated Manhunt from other stealth games that came out at the time. Because like, Metal Gear Solid, you're either like slicing a person's throat or slowly bringing them to the ground. Whereas in this, you were encouraged to just go hog wild on people. And to accentuate the snuff film-oriented art style, when an execution happens, the camera cuts away from the player's third-person perspective to showing one of the camera angles. And so you see this sort of grainy, closed-circuit video footage as Cash is doing these various things. But yeah, so in essence, Manhunt's core gameplay loop revolves around sneaking up on enemies and murdering them in the most gruesome ways, then moving on to the next session to repeat the process. And to accompany its elevated content, Rockstar also brought in their trademark high production value to Manhunt. It's kind of what they were known for with GTA 3, with GTA Vice City. The game was built on the RenderWare engine, which was the same engine as the Grand Theft Auto games, albeit with more detailed character models and a heavier emphasis on lighting and sound design. So light, shadow are really important in Manhunt, whereas they're not so much important in Grand Theft Auto, and a really high emphasis on high sound production. The Edinburgh-based team also brought in a recognizable actor to bring the depraved director to life, casting fellow Scotsman Brian Cox to lend his voice to the game's intense action. And Cox is likely best known today for his role in Succession. He also did a voiceover in a bunch of McDonald's commercials. So if you've ever heard this sort of haughty person going, ba 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 ba, that's Brian Cox, the same guy who did the voice for this game.
Gotta pay the bills.
Yeah. And fun fact about Brian Cox, too, he was also the first on-screen depiction of Hannibal Lecter, which he did in a 1986 movie with a suspiciously similar sounding title of Manhunter, which is quite a good movie. Have you seen Red Dragon? Red Dragon is kind of a watered-down version. It's basically, in my opinion, a lesser remake of Manhunter. He's quite good in it, too. Rockstar also pushed the boundaries of the PS2 hardware. For example, if the player used a PS2 headset, because you could use a headset in certain games for the PlayStation, not only would they hear the director's commands through the earpiece, as though they were really like Cash, enemy stalkers could hear the player's sounds through the microphone. So you could either use that as a way to draw out enemies in a better position, but also if you're not paying attention, you could make sounds and attract noise to the stalkers that they might come towards Cash. Because the game is really, really heavily reliant on sound. There's a key mechanic where like everything you do makes noise. And so like there's certain terrain you walk over. So like if you walk over gravel, it's more likely it's going to generate noise, and the noise can then draw attention. But the idea is you can use that to your advantage. So like, for example, you could take like a brick, and if you throw a brick across the way, people will follow where the noise is, and you can use that to sneak up on them. You can use bats to hit the walls and things like that. And so it's a really heavy emphasis on sound in a way that wasn't a key mechanic in, say, Grand Theft Auto. And first impressions from the gaming press for Manhunt were overall positive for Rockstar North's latest big swing. Manhunt was the cover article in the September 2003 issue of PSM, and the writers described the game's frank approach to man's inhumanity to man as one of the most terrifying elements it had to offer, explaining, quote, Manhunt is among the scariest games we've ever played, despite the fact that there are no zombies, no ghosts, no randomly flesh-crafted groups of animated body parts. In fact, this lack of supernatural elements is what makes the game so freaky. Manhunt is not scary because you encounter something unreal. It's just the opposite. Manhunt is scary because it lives at the very edge of the feasible. These enemies are real people, except they're crazed by bloodlust and unhindered by the laws of morality. They could be any of us, and that's downright chilling, end quote. Ricardo Torres of GameSpot added in an October the 14th, 2003 preview, quote, from what we've seen so far, Manhunt should offer a decidedly different experience than Rockstar is known for. The change of pace appears to be a promising one and should be a fresh take on the now heavily trafficked stealth action genre. Whether or not it can manage to offer a compelling enough experience to set it apart from the long shadow cast by its predecessors remains to be seen. So far, though, Manhunt is shaping up to be a disturbing and unique game in its own right. It should definitely be worth a look, provided you're not easily unsettled or have an aversion to blood, end quote. Speaking of which, Manhunt's ultra-violent executions were a divisive subject among some reporters covering the game. Reporting in a preview article on Manhunt for the October 2003 issue of official US PlayStation magazine, Terry Scooter Wynn expressed his discomfort over the executions, writing, quote, for me, it's not so much that the game is creepy, but those executions make me squirm every time I see them. Using a glass shard to shank a guy multiple times in the face, or breaking someone's neck with a bat just makes me go yikes and throw my hands up in the air, end quote. Meanwhile, editor John Davison added, quote, GTA courted controversy with its content, but in a way that was fitting with the whole gangster vibe. I want to see more on Manhunt. But this time, the violence does seem to be getting a bit gratuitous. I mean, is it really necessary to beat a guy with a baseball bat with a nail at the end, end quote?
Depends on the guy.
It should be taken on a case-by-case basis. I'm sorry, Andy, I jumped over you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the main character, Cash, Kevin, do you know, does he ever, like, respond to the director cajoling him to, you know, commit the more egregious kills? Does he ever say anything like, oh, you're a sicko, director? Or is he just like silently like, yeah, he'll just do whatever buttons you press? And like, does the game at any point express a value judgment on these executions beyond just the points that you're awarded?
That's a great question. So I will tell you, I have been playing through Manhunt. I haven't finished it yet. And so far, at no point does anybody stop to really reflect on the violent content. But what's weird about Cash is that Cash is not a silent protagonist. He doesn't speak for most of the game, but most of the things he says are very functional. They're like, for example, there are some missions later in the game where you have to rescue hostages, and he'll like cut them loose and go, get out of here. Aside from that, he has no characterization. We have no insights into what he thinks about this. And at least from what I've seen so far, at no point does he really engage with the director about what he's doing. It's more like, okay, like you saw at the very beginning, we saw the opening clip where he's like jumping up at the cameras, like either get attention or get away. But that's pretty much it. Other than that, it's like, okay, here's a knife, go kill some dumb fuck. And Cash does it because this is one of those situations where like the only choices you have as a player, if you want the game to continue, is to, you know, kill people. Your alternative otherwise is to turn the system off and go outside. But yeah, we really don't get very much pushback vis-a-vis Cash. He's barely a character, if he's a character at all in this game. Phil, I saw you had your hand raised before. Do you have a question or a point you wanted to add?
Yeah, this is just based on the video that you showed us of the executions. Usually I'm taking the stance of trying to, you know, disagree with the moral panic aspects of most of the video games we talk about. And I guess to a certain extent, when it comes to violence in video games, there's a spectrum of like fun to sadistic, you know, and the more fun it is, I think, the more you minimize the sadistic part. Looking at that montage of murders, that just kind of struck me as very, very close to this sadistic end of that spectrum. I didn't get a lot out of that in terms of fun. It just kind of grossed me out.
Yeah, and that's definitely something in terms of context for violence in video games and the way Rockstar is doing this. This is definitely on the far end. I like your idea of a sort of silly versus sadistic spectrum. This is definitely more on the far end in terms of what it depicts as more sadism. And a lot of what Rockstar was trying to do at this point was really push boundaries. Every game that they do this time, they're like, okay, we're not just going to push this technical boundary, we're going to push this cultural boundary. And check back on our episode on the hot coffee incident, because hot coffee and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas were in development while they were promoting Manhunt. And that one is definitely a game where, like, we want there to be sex and dildo sex and beating people with dildos and chronic masturbation and stuff like that. So it's definitely part of that vein of Rockstar North trying to be more edgy, and I think to trigger at least conversations. And we'll go into a little bit later on whether or not I think they were actively trying to start a moral panic with Manhunt. And skipping ahead, I don't think that they were, but I think that based on what Rockstar was doing at the time and how they approached themselves and kind of what were their core philosophy as a development team, that they were going to be triggering controversy and concern. And I think that this depiction of violence fits into that pretty well too. Kate, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, the moment may have passed, but I just wanted to mention again, Phil, to your point about like the fun versus the sadistic and this being Rockstar. I think something that they had with the GTA series up to this point, and you said they were working on San Andreas at the same time?
Yeah, in 2003, they're at that point at work at GTA San Andreas.
I think that what that series had that Manhunt lacks is because there's some pretty sadistic stuff that you can do in the GTA games, but like there's a subversiveness to it. You're sort of like you're breaking the rules. You're indulging in a way that it's hard for me to articulate, but you're indulging in baser instincts in a way that feels fun. The moments of extreme violence, I think, are mixed with, you know, wackier stuff. I'm thinking some of the things like the announcements that come over the radio sometimes, or some of your fellow characters, like there's humor to it. There's more to the story. You're not just good. Manhunt, the montage you showed looked very unpleasant. And I mean, it's weird to talk about it this way, but dare I say almost just monotonous, just joyless, monotonous. Okay, now I'm going to kill this person. Now I'm going to kill this person. And I just, an endless supply of plastic bags to murder people. I would get bored, but in a way that made me feel gross.
Those are great observations. And one thing that people did point out at the time was there were lots of comparisons between what Rockstar was doing with Manhunt versus what they were doing with GTA 3 and like Vice City. And a lot of people made the exact same point you made, Kate, which is that in Grand Theft Auto, Vice City and Grand Theft Auto 3, if you think about this in the framework of like a movie, like Scarface is a very violent movie, but you play into that because it's all part of Tony Montana's rise to the top and then his massive fall at the end. And like Goodfellas, using Ray Liotta as another example, like that you're bearing witness to the seedy underworld and you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs and those kinds of things. And a lot of people did comment on the fact that one thing that separates Grand Theft Auto from Manhunt was that it fits the aesthetic of that. And also people did point out the humor, because the Grand Theft Auto open world games are very satirical. Everything you're inundated with has a certain level of humor. There is a wry humor to Manhunt, but it's harder to find. And a lot of people focus more on the sort of more violent aspects. Someone else had their hand raised that wanted to jump in. I think it was Phil.
I won't say that everything about that montage of grisly murders with plastic bags was like ill-intended. I do want to credit them for taking plastic bags and not relegating them to single-use plastic, because they were, because sometimes there's some redundancy that's built into the plastic bags, and you're like, this was wasteful because there's way more plastic in here than you need to carry your groceries. And then them killing people with them kind of pushes that plastic to the limit and takes it more in the direction of a legitimate use of single-use plastic. That having been said, I don't know if these were plastic bags that were bought with the express purpose of killing people, in which case they are single-use plastic bags. And I can't get behind that at all.
I was simply assuming that some of them still had the dog poop in them as he's suffocating people.
No! Insult to injury, my God.
Kate, you just moved that sadistic dot even further towards the sadistic. Now it's like off the scale a little bit.
The question is, how much dog poo are we going to use in our game? I've read David Kushner's book on Rockstar, and I'm honestly stunned that these guys didn't use dog poo more in one of their games. Because there's a certain streak among the guys at the heads, like the Hauser brothers, where they're kind of like 15-year-olds at heart. I'm kind of stunned that they didn't do something like that.
That you know of, it could be like an unfinished part of the game. Like that if you accidentally phase through a wall or something, you'll see just the mountains of dog poop they were going to use.
Yeah, or maybe they were afraid, like, wait, using dog poop in GTA, is that too close to sticking a gun up a cat's butt in Postal 2 and using it as a silencer? We don't, like, they're ripping us off. We don't want to be accused of then ripping them off in turn.
Oh, Vince Desi would have had a field day if he had any inclination that anything from a Rockstar game might have borrowed from Postal. You know, he would absolutely not shut up about that. Vince Desi. Check out our previous episodes on Postal and Postal 2 to learn a lot about Vincent J. Desiderio Jr. Before we move on to our next thing, Phil, you got me thinking about this idea of using single-use plastic bags for suffocating, and I think that if we want to help save our fragile planet, we really should get into the habit of advocating for using canvas bags and reusable bags for our suffocations.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like the garrote wire. You can probably get a few uses out of that. So even belts are great because they're multi-use. They can keep your pants up and be used to choke a bitch.
You slid that in there very well, Andy. Yeah, so you could push that angle. I mean, some of these deaths were to single-use plastic, but that could be analogous to what we're doing to the planet. I'm assuming that some of the other people were taken out with like microscopic plastic particles inside their abdomen that they consume from eating fish, or they died due to too much mercury poisoning. You know, there are other conservation angles here. Like after that montage of death, I don't want to, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I just want to make sure I've given this game its due.
If at the end of the game, you have Brian Cox sitting in like a director's chair looking directly at the camera and say, listen, the real message of this game was conservation. Save our fragile planet. Reuse those bags.
Real monster isn't man, it's global warming.
So yeah, bringing us back on track. So some write-ups, and people are really talking about these executions, and some of you are saying, like, are these gratuitous? Are they too much? And some of the preview write-ups in the gaming press appeared tailor-made to rouse the anti-video game crowd into just a good old-fashioned moral panic. For example, the same article from official US PlayStation magazine, the one previewing Manhunt from the October 2003 issue, really leaned into the snuff film angle, bearing the subheading, Metal Gear Snuff, while a screenshot with the execution bore the caption, Snuffality. Meanwhile, in an August 22nd, 2003 preview on Manhunt, Douglas Perry of IGN described the game's weapon selection in terms that would likely make Joe Lieberman squeal with righteous indignation. Quote, the game offers about 20 weapons in all, but as always, Rockstar is staying mum about the others. Our recommendation is to think of the most twisted, sick, and evil weapon possible, and well, it's probably gonna be in this game, end quote. And Manhunt's frank take on violence didn't only leave some reporters uneasy. Reportedly, some at Rockstar itself also took issue with its content. One such critic was Jeff Williams, a web producer for Rockstar Take-Two at the time of Manhunt's development. Williams developed Manhunt's website and some of its branding, including a bunch of the game's promotional screenshots and some of its box art. He left the company in 2004, and 3 years later, on July the 24th, 2007, he shared an insider's perspective on Manhunt's development. In a post that ended up receiving a lot of attention in both the gaming press and among Manhunt's critics, Williams recalled that he and some of his coworkers felt uncomfortable with the game's subject matter, explaining, quote, I was pretty vocal in telling my superiors that while I do whatever they asked me to do within reason, I didn't support Manhunt's release. It may sound surprising, but there was almost a mutiny at the company over that game. It was Rockstar North's pet project. Most of us at Rockstar Games wanted no part of it. We'd already weathered plenty of controversy over GTA 3 and Vice City. We were no strangers to it, but Manhunt felt different. With GTA, we always had the excuse that the gameplay was untethered. You never had to hurt anybody that wasn't a bad guy in one of the missions. You could play completely ethically if you wanted, and the game was parody anyway, so lighten up. Manhunt, though, just made us all feel icky. It was all about the violence, and it was realistic violence. We all knew that there was no way we could explain away that game. There was no way to rationalize it. We were crossing a line, end quote. It's kind of a little bit what you were talking about, Kate.
Yeah, it's interesting to know what the perspectives were from people who were putting the game out. And I feel like that's a bit more eloquently said. I'm not trying to pick on the reviewer who you said kept throwing their hands up and saying "yikes," but like this feels a little bit more real. But like, here are my moral objections to what we're doing. I think sometimes you can think of it of like, do I just not like this? Am I actively doing harm by working on this? And it sounds like this person had some major objections.
Yeah, and I appreciate, that distinction of like, yeah, the GTA games are intended to be like parody or satire. And so in that case, the violence is theoretically serving some type of purpose that you're like, what are we saying about the violence is like, well, it's a commentary on just like violence in movies or whatever. But like here, the violence is its own end. It seems like what is kind of this developer's perspective, and at least from what we've seen so far, kind of seems like the case. It's sort of like there was an element of Rockstar where they were like, oh yeah, that's right, we make shocking games, so let's make a real shocking game. And they like missed the point of what the previous shocking games were supposed to be about.
Bill, did you want to jump in?
Sure. I think Kate mentioned this before about how this is a good looking game, especially for 2003, by my standards anyway. It seems like the stop motion or the motion capture that they used is really good. The sound quality is really good, like you mentioned. And I think one of the things that pushes the sadistic angle is that there doesn't seem to be an element of humor. And two, when you see these people getting killed, it looks really realistic. Like, it looks good. The audio is good. The motions are good. It really does look like somebody getting brutally killed from behind. And I think that's also part of, like, if it were more cartoony or like if it were less realistic or high fidelity, I think it wouldn't be as disturbing. But that's just kind of the only feeling I'm left with.
That's so true about like the technological limitations of certain, like the Friday the 13th game. What was that for the Atari, Kev?
NES.
NES, right. It was not remotely scary, obviously, because it was just kind of silly when in fact you're basically doing the same thing. The people are just getting picked off one by one and brutally stabbed to death, but they look like little clusters of pixels on the screen. And I mean, I think there are even some games that if they're technologically behind for the time period in terms of how they look, people are inclined to take them less seriously. I think, what is it? Deadly Premonition, I believe, was one that it ended up coming out for the 360, but that was because it missed its release for the Xbox. So you had an original Xbox-esque game in terms of the quality of the visuals and sound, etc., on the 360, and I think it suffered for that just because it wasn't up to par. I almost said up to snuff, but I'm not going to. And
impressive restraint.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just kind of rambling here, but I think that makes a lot of sense, Phil, about why it looks and is more gratuitous. It's also more just realistic / for lack of a better term, like a by the numbers murder. Like, I'm going to suffocate this person now. I'm going to bash their head. And like, I'm thinking about, say, Mortal Kombat fatalities. They're pretty gruesome, and more recent ones are more realistic looking, I guess. But it's like, it's so over the top. I wouldn't call all of them fun necessarily, but they're kind of, again, more absurd and over the top, whereas this just feels, again, we're going back to joyless.
All right, so going back to Williams again, he's concerned that Rockstar North has really crossed the line with this, and it was harder for Rockstar to defend this. Now, I don't doubt Williams' account, although I will say I haven't come across many other personal accounts from people involved in Manhunt's development. So I don't have a lot of insights from an insider's perspective on the creation of this game. However, something I want to make clear is that Jeff Williams worked for Rockstar Games, which produced Manhunt, and that is not to be confused with Rockstar North, which developed Manhunt. So there's a certain distinction about where his role is relative to the game's development. And I feel it's an important distinction, especially because some moral crusaders later used Williams's blog post as a kind of smoking gun that even the game's makers felt Manhunt should not have been made. This does get a lot of traction later on, particularly among moral conservatives who see, yeah, there was this mutiny at Rockstar. They should have never made this game, and they knew they shouldn't have made this game. On the other hand, I also feel that Williams's perspective was understandable. Rockstar's previous titles, such as Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City, had been hotbeds of controversy, from their violence to their language to the ability to pick up sex workers and pay them for digital sex, only to murder them and take back your money. It's also worth mentioning that by 2007, when Williams put out this blog post, Rockstar and Take-Two had not only faced controversies from the typical pearl-clutching moral conservative crowd of the Hillary Clinton, Leland Yee, and Jack Thompson variety, but they had also weathered lawsuits, federal investigations from the Federal Trade Commission and Securities and Exchanges Commission, including possible stock manipulation and fraud, and a media firestorm over a hidden sex minigame left in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And for more on that, check out our previous episode on the Hot Coffee mod. To say nothing of the battle over potential anti-video game legislation that the industry was still fighting in the courts. And for more on that, check out our previous episode on Brown v. EMA. Now, Manhunt, from the perspective of someone at Rockstar Games or Take-Two, could be seen as just another potential headache that the people working in the non-development parts of the company, like their marketing, their distribution, their legal departments, had to deal with in Rockstar North's constant pursuit of every social taboo. The last thing I'll say about Williams' account is that his talk about possible mutiny over Manhunt didn't come to light until nearly 4 years after Manhunt's late November 2003 release, so it only became an issue several years after the game had come and gone from the cultural zeitgeist. I think that's a really good note to end on. And so we'll pick this conversation up next time when we'll start shifting over to some of the other people who had issues with Manhunt, our old friends, Moral Crusaders. And so we'll pick up that conversation and talk about what they thought about this game and what their concerns were about it next time. And that will do it for today's episode of Scandalous Games. If you like what we're doing and want to help the show, subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating. If you want to learn more, check out our website, Scandalous Games Podcast on WordPress.com, where I publish the show notes and the sources for every episode. Our theme music is Occam Seek Me by Seek Knowledge via the Free Music Archive, used under a CC BY-NC SA 3.0 US license. If you have a question, comment, or idea for a topic for a future episode, email us at scandalousgamespodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Kevin Impellizeri.
I'm Phil Thomas.
I'm Andy Hunter.
I'm Kate.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next Scandal. Subscribe to Fat Roll Gaming on YouTube.